Hello everyone. This will be the video series for identity and access management. Let us start with Azure Directory Services. So what is Azure Directory Services? Earlier, we had Azure Active Directory, which is also called as Azure AD. Azure AD, now it is called as Microsoft ENTRA ID. So what is ENTRA ID? ENTRA ID simply means enter. So we are entering into the Azure and we have the identity to enter into the Azure Cloud. So what are the identities? Identities can be user, groups, computers, application. So all these are all referred to as identities. When I have similar action, a user who is performing some action, so he will be performing creating virtual machine, creating storage account. If there are other users who also have similar action to be performed, so then we can create a group. Basically, a user has a role to perform some action. Either it can be creating virtual machine, creating storage account, or creating the virtual network. So when we have similar set of users who are doing the same action, we can add all those users into one particular group. Basically, a user is a single user and a group has multiple users who has the same or common goal. Microsoft ENTRA ID is a directory services. So when you create an account, so what exactly you require to create an account in the Azure Cloud? So this is the Azure Cloud. To create an account in Azure Cloud, you require email ID and password. So let us assume your email ID is cloudtech@hotmail.com. The default tenant which will be created automatically by Azure is cloudtech.onmicrosoft.com. So this will be the default tenant name which will be automatically created. So anyone who is creating an account, they will have a default tenant which will be automatically created. So with this identity, what you can do, you can sign in and access both Microsoft Cloud application and cloud application that you develop. If you are using the on-prem environment, then you will be running Windows operating system installed with Active Directory software. If you are on on-prem environment, we know that there will be an Active Directory which will be running in the on-prem using the Windows Server. So this will be the Windows Server operating system which you will be installing on the Active Directory. So if this is the domain controller, you will install Windows Server operating system, then install the DC promo tool, then deploy your domain controller. So this will be fontaso.com. So this is the domain name if you wanted to deploy fontaso.com domain for your environment. Microsoft ENTRA ID is a cloud-based identity and access management service. When you use Active Directory in on-prem and connect to Azure Cloud, the on-prem logins can be monitored. Microsoft can help protecting by detecting the suspicious sign-in attempts at no extra cost. I also said the identity can be application or computer. So whenever you have an application like web app and this web app needs to access the storage account or a database, SQL database. So we need to provide the identity for the web app so that it can connect to the SQL database or storage account. So that is the reason we have identity for computers and also for the application. So who can use Microsoft Entra ID? IT administrator. IT administrator can use Microsoft Entra ID to control access to users and groups, resources, and applications. Application developers. Developers can use Microsoft Entra ID to provide a standard-based approach for adding functionalities to application. For example, single sign-on with existing user credentials. This will be very useful whenever, for example, if I say I have a web application in Azure Cloud, I have integrated this particular code with the authentication. So any user who wants to connect to this application, he can use his personal email ID and you will be able to log in with this personal email ID to the web application which I have deployed into the Azure Cloud. Users. Users can manage their identities. If permitted, they also can do the self password reset. So they can even do the self password reset if they have been permitted. Online service subscribers. So whenever you create an account in Azure Cloud, the first step by default, an Microsoft Entra ID will be created. So Entra ID tenant will be created. So you can imagine like you are in a hotel and this particular hotel, the first step to enter into the hotel, you have the security. At the security gate, you need to provide your mobile number. This is your contact number, your name to enter into the hotel. So once you enter into the hotel, there is a receptionist or there is a reception, and in the reception, you basically use the credit card to book the room. So this is exactly same. So when you enter into the Azure Cloud, you use your email ID and password to log into the Azure Cloud. Then create a subscription. You manage your subscription by paying your charges for the resources which you have consumed. And the same Microsoft Entra ID will be used as the identity and access management for Microsoft 365, Microsoft Office 365, and Microsoft Dynamics CRM Online. So these are the some of the services which you use Microsoft Entra ID when you subscribe for the online subscription. So what does Microsoft Entra ID do? Entra ID checks for authentication. This includes verifying identity to access applications and resources. And also it also provides some other features like self-service password reset, multi-factor authentication, smart lockout facility, conditional access, just-in-time access. So these are some of the features which are provided by Microsoft Entra ID depending upon the license what you have. And single sign-on. You just remember one single username and password to access multiple applications. Application management. You can manage your cloud and on-prem application by using Microsoft Entra ID. Device management. Along with the accounts for individual people and groups, Microsoft Entra ID supports the registration of devices. Registration of devices in the sense you register your devices to Entra ID. Only the authorized devices can authenticate to the Azure resources or Azure services. Can I connect my on-prem Active Directory with Microsoft Entra ID? Before going to this, let me highlight some of the key points. So if I am discussing about Microsoft Entra ID, so this is actually Azure Active Directory. If I am referring Microsoft Entra domain services, this will be Azure Active Directory Domain Services. If I am discussing about Windows Domain Controller or Windows Active Directory, this will be always on-prem domain controller. So let us continue with the topic. Can I connect my on-prem AD with Microsoft ENTRA ID? Yes, you can connect Active Directory with Microsoft ENTRA ID. This will be referred as hybrid identity model. So you have your on-prem data center, then you connect your Azure Cloud. This will be your ENTRA ID. To connect your on-prem domain controller with Microsoft ENTRA ID, there is a tool which is called as Microsoft ENTRA Connect. So this is earlier called as Azure AD Connect. Now it is called as Microsoft ENTRA Connect. So Microsoft ENTRA Connect synchronizes user identities between on-prem Active Directory and Microsoft ENTRA ID. When you connect your on-prem domain controller with ENTRA ID using the Microsoft ENTRA Connect, you have the features like single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and self-service password reset. There is a picture which shows how we can connect on-prem domain controller with ENTRA ID. So this is the ENTRA ID, which has the default tenant. So this is the default tenant. When we use our email ID and password to create an account in Azure Cloud, we have the default tenant which will be created. And this is the domain controller which is there in the on-premise. And we use a tool which is called as Microsoft ENTRA Connect. So there is a tool, ENTRA Connect. So this tool we have to install on-prem. This can be installed on any of the server in on-prem. So once we install the tool, ENTRA Connect in one of the server and configure and authenticate to the Azure Cloud, we will be able to sync the users, groups, and password. So this can be in both direction. So whenever we are using managed domain, which is Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services, we can only sync in one direction. This is from ENTRA ID to the managed domain service, which is Microsoft ENTRA Domain Service. There is a service which is called as Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services. So this service is similar to the on-prem domain controller. So if you have deployed the Windows server and installed the domain controller, you wanted to have similar features available in Azure Cloud, then you can use the Microsoft ENTRA Domain Service. The features which are available such as domain join, group policy, LDAP, and Kerberos. So these are the features which are available in Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services. So since this is a managed service, there is no need to deploy, manage, and patch the domain controllers. And if you wanted to run legacy application which needs to be authenticated to domain controller, which was available in on-prem, we can lift and shift the application to the Azure Cloud and authenticate to the Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services. So Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services also integrate with the Microsoft ENTRA tenant. So how does the Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services work? When you create a Microsoft ENTRA Domain Services, this is the managed service. When you create the Microsoft ENTRA Domain Service, you need to provide the namespace. Namespace is basically the domain name. You can provide the domain name like contoso.local, contoso.com, or your organization name basically. So you need to provide your domain name. This will be your namespace. Two virtual machines will be deployed. There will be two virtual machines will be deployed in the same region where you are creating your managed Microsoft Entra domain services. This will be called as replica set. This is for redundancy. Why Microsoft is creating two virtual machines? This is called as replica set. These two are domain controllers, and this is for redundancy. There is no need for us to manage. Since this is a managed service, there is no need for us to manage, configure, or update these domain controllers. So backups of these domain controllers will be taken care, and also the disks will be encrypted at rest. So this will be taken care by Azure. Is information synchronized? When you configure Microsoft Entra domain services, it will be always one-way synchronization. This will be always from Entra ID to the managed Entra domain services. And if we have Entra Connect, which is Microsoft Entra Connect deployed in on-prem, then this will be two-way sync. For hybrid, it will be two-way sync. When we have managed domain using Microsoft Entra domain service, then this will be one-way sync. So basically, a managed domain is configured to perform a one-way synchronization from Microsoft Entra ID to Microsoft Entra domain services. So in case of hybrid environment, when we have Microsoft Entra Connect, the users, groups, and password will be synced from the on-prem domain controller to the Entra ID. So this will be synced to the Entra ID, then it will be synced to the managed domain, which is nothing but the Entra domain service. So this is how the sync will take place when we have an hybrid environment. So in summary, we have Microsoft Entra ID. This provides identity and management service. We can create users, groups, and also we will be able to create the service principal for computers and applications. We have another service which is called as Microsoft Entra domain service. If we wanted to have same features like on-prem domain controller, then we can use Microsoft Entra domain services. We have another tool which is called as Microsoft Entra Connect. So this tool is used to sync the users, groups, and password from on-prem domain controller to Entra ID. So we have, this is in Azure Cloud, and also we have managed domain service, which is Entra domain service. Then it will be synced. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the content, please subscribe and share the video. Thank you and take care.